It's Talking Pints. Now, behind me, you can see the Palace of Westminster. There are terraces and bars aplenty, but we're here in the studio in Westminster Tower. I'm joined by Dr Hoenderkamp for Talking Pints. Welcome to the programme. Now, you've got a very interesting story as a doctor and a media medic. How you got there is fascinating. And I know you've had some pretty strong views about the National Health Service, the way it's operated, particularly through the pandemic. But looking at your history, very interesting. I mean, you know, you don't come from the classical background of somebody who would become a GP and a media medic, East End girl, single parent family, and from what I can see, a school that didn't really encourage you.
No. And I think actually it's all of that which has given me a different view on the NHS to maybe the doctors that have gone in at 21 straight from university. And so always seen the NHS through NHS glasses, where I've seen it from having lots of experience in business beforehand and always having to fight to get where I wanted to be. And so, I went to this Sync school in East London where being bright and wanting to learn really wasn't, you know, the done thing. And I was bullied mercilessly as a result. And I think that made me quite strong as well. I'm not saying that kids should be bullied, but you know, it certainly formed who I am. And I was always going to go to medical school because my mum, who was the driving force behind me, always said, you can do whatever you want, you know, work hard, get out of here. And that was always my plan. I did 11 O-levels, I did 4 science A-levels, and then I went a bit crazy, Nigel, to be honest. I woke up one day, was tired of learning, went to my careers teacher. They didn't want girls in medicine, and they really didn't. I had to fight.
Just sort of pick that up for a second. So you were actively discouraged as a woman from going into medicine?
To do 3 science O-levels, which what you needed to do then to go to medical school, my mother had to go to the school and fight. And they said, well, how does she know she wants to be a doctor? You know, we don't have girls in science doing 3. I didn't tell you this, I did my chemistry O-level at night school, age 14, because I was the only girl in the class. And my chemistry teacher said, oh my God, we've got a girl in the class. And every time I asked a question, he threw me out. And I went home and said to my mum, I'm not going to pass chemistry if I stay in the class.
So that was real prejudice?
Yeah, really. The girls then at that point weren't doing sciences. So when I went to my careers teacher and said, I can't do this, I don't want to be a doctor anymore, instead of saying go travelling for a year, which would have worked, I just needed to let off some steam.
The gap year hadn't been invented then.
No, but I needed one, and I really did. She said, oh, OK, why don't you go to Marks & Spencer's management? It's really hard to get in, but you might. And I did. And I hated every single second of it. You know, I really did. I hated it.
But kind of, given where you are now as a doctor, but very much, you know, a media medic, and you know, you've done BBC programmes and you appear on all sorts of programmes and you write prolifically. But the next stage of your career really interests me because you finish up in the media. And, you know, you finish up having worked with Robert Maxwell's paper for a bit, and probably got out of there very well when you did. But you finish up working
back in the media
with Richard Desmond.
Yes.
OK magazine.
Who I know very well.
I know Richard very well. He was a big supporter of my political campaigns, a donor, Express newspapers, and someone who's a company I enjoy. But
he's a difficult man to work for.
My goodness me, I couldn't say. I mean, I'm a friend that has a, you know, drink with him or we talk about the world. I guess to work for, very demanding.
Awful at points, but if you could actually work with him, you did very well. And he was very good at just saying to you, if you came to him with an idea that wasn't in your area of expertise and he liked it, before he palmed it out to someone else, he would say, well, do you want to do it? So it was different to other media companies because I'd worked at the Express before that, and that was you stayed in your box and you did what you had to do. So yeah, he was difficult and it was interesting, and I did everything there. I mean, I was the publisher of OK when I went in. I took over Chic and Attitude magazine. I used to go up to Sky, to his television channels, and help train the salespeople. Whatever he wanted, I negotiated paper deals. You know, it was an amazing experience. I married his right-hand man, Stan Meyerson, who was another difficult man. He won't mind me saying that, we're still friends. So it was interesting, but I'd had this experience of difficult men long before that when I worked for Maxwell on the London Daily News. And when that closed and I was 21 and and thought I knew everything, he invited 7 of us to a meeting with him where he wanted us to stay on at the Mirror. And he gave us his spiel, and then he said, do you have any questions? And I actually was sitting at the left of him, and he was huge. He was this massive man. And I said, yes, I have a question. Why did you close this paper when you said you would give it away free for 2 years? And he looked at me and he said, if, my dear, you knew as much about newspaper publishing as you think you do, you'd be sitting in my chair.
Mm-hmm. Well, there you are.
So I left.
Yeah. No, you were right to. But I know you've. But the OK stuff fascinates me. But then you decide to go back to where you started, and you go off as a mature student.
Yes.
And become a doctor, and you've moved on through that. And I mean, you know, as I understand it, you know, skin and all sorts of things to do with skin is your speciality now.
Well, no, my speciality is actually women's health.
Okay.
So women's health, menopause, I've been a big campaigner for. I did a documentary for BBC Inside Out on that. I have a private aesthetics clinic that I work 6 hours a week in. And it's been an interesting experience because I work 3 days a week, 4 days, because I work in A&E as well, as I am this weekend. You know, in all of this COVID stuff, where I have been very outspoken, other doctors have often worked so hard to shut me down, telling people that I'm not actually a GP that's practicing, that all I do is inject Botox into people's faces. I mean, the smear campaign has often been, you know, massive.
But you dared to challenge the orthodoxy, and you're not supposed to do things like that. And you've done it particularly on vaccine mandates.
Yes.
Which is a battle we appear to have won. I say we because you know...
Kind of. I don't think we have won it, Nigel, and I think that's the worry. So, yes, I think when he's done his consultation and they vote in the House, it probably will be voted down as a mandate, but he has actively encouraged all of the regulatory bodies, the NMC, the GMC, to make it a professional responsibility. So doctors and nurses are going to come to their appraisal, and their appraiser's going to say,
so through the back door.
Have you had your vaccine? He's also told trusts that they can actually not employ people if they haven't had their vaccines. So doctors who move jobs every 6 months aren't going to be able to move jobs. They won't be able to train. Nurses won't be able to train. So I don't think that battle is over.
OK, it's interesting. That is not completely surprising, but interesting. But one thing, I mean, look, you know, I was for the lockdowns when they first happened.
Yeah.
It was something new.
We didn't know.
I had friends in Milan telling me the most alarming stories of what was going on there. I then very quickly got bored with the whole thing and thought we've got to get on with life and protect the vulnerable. But one thing we can say, and you've campaigned more vocally and more publicly than I have on this, I might have been a bit later to the party on it, but you know, fair enough, we all make our minds up on things at different points in time. I was early on the Europe thing.
I was with you.
Very early. But the fact that all restrictions in England are ending, that we are the first country to really say we're going to get rid of all this stuff, actually shows you the power of a free press, which we still pretty much do. The complete censoring of these arguments has been online.
Yeah.
It's not been in print, you know.
To a degree.
To a degree, and I think GBNews has added to that media plurality in terms of debate. And I've noticed things that we're doing, other broadcasters now beginning to do. I also think that enough sensible members of Parliament were prepared to rebel against the party line and their leader. So I actually think this is a genuine victory. You know, we're not going back into lockdowns.
No, and I don't think we ever can or ever will.
No.
And I think, I mean, you've just been talking to Age UK. For me, I think my first article about this was April 2020, when I sat in GP for a day and saw 4 different patients at different stages of their cancer diagnosis to treatment be cancelled. And I could see immediately the tragic effects that this was going to have if this continued for any time. And I wrote that first article in anger, actually, because I'd seen someone who'd had a curative lung cancer operation cancelled. Curative. So by the time she got to operation, she probably wouldn't be curative anymore. And to me, that was devastatingly tragic, because I understood that COVID was killing people. But surely we couldn't just discard all of these other people. You know, 450 people a day die of cancer in this country. It's going to go up because of what we've done.
Is there anything we can do to rectify this, to resolve this? We've got this massive waiting list. We've got these cancer pages. I mean, diabetes screening.
Yeah.
we've barely been bothering from what I can make out and talking to diabetes experts. What do we have to do? What needs to happen, not just with the backlog from the pandemic, but the NHS, it has a problem, doesn't it?
It's broken. It's not fit for purpose at the moment. And I think we do have to almost rebuild it from scratch. And the moment you say that, people start screaming, oh, she wants to privatise it, she wants to... I don't. I actually think if I was PM tomorrow, and obviously that's not going to happen, Nigel, I would say to people, look, you need to trust us. The NHS will always be free at the point of contact. That's the first thing. And we have to reassure people that that is the aim, not to privatise it, not to put it in other people's hands. And I think one of the massive problems in the NHS is the waste and the duplication. And much of that has come from splitting it up into a zillion different pieces. Psychiatry, for example, that used to be one department, is now hundreds. So if you've got, not hundreds, but it's lots. Yeah. You know, if you're a new diagnosis, you go into an assessment and brief team for 6 weeks. But if you need treatment for longer than that, you then go to a recovery team for 6 months. But if you need longer than that, you go to another team. Every one of those teams has its own back office, its own photocopy machines, its own contracts.
So are we going to finish up? Are we going to finish up with an NHS in a country that's not prepared to have a proper debate about reform, where those without money get an increasingly bad service,
yes,
and those with money opt out to one of the best? I mean, the private medical healthcare in London is brilliant, isn't it? Absolutely. Are we going to finish up with this being another division in society?
I think we are, and I think we're already going there. We've seen over the last 2 years people so frustrated at their hip pain that's stopping them from working and getting on with life that they're scraping together the money.
My mother went and had a private knee operation.
Yeah.
I don't think she'd ever been outside the NHS. And she's old enough to remember, of course, when it was set up, and in desperation and not wanting to wait for 2 years, she went and did that. And
it's tragic.
It's worrying, isn't it?
But lots and lots and lots of people. I mean, I sometimes speak to people on the phone, Nigel, and they need physio, and the wait list for physio is months and months and months. And I say to them, if you've got about £50, you can probably have an initial physio appointment. They haven't. Some people haven't got £50. That might sound really weird to lucky people like us, but it isn't.
No, I know this is real. Dr Hoenderkamp, thank you for joining me here on Talking Pints. This is a conversation. Well, your life's been fascinating, but the last few minutes of it, there are no easy conclusions or answers to any of this. It's going to be a real problem.